High Admiral Han stood before the massive viewing window of the command ship. His four arms moved across the control panels while his large purple eyes watched the destruction below. Another planet was dying, the third one this week. The swarm had come from beyond the galaxy's edge 6 months ago. At first, the Confederation thought it was just another hostile alien race. They had fought many wars before and always won. Their energy weapons could destroy entire fleets. Their shields could stop any attack. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of most species in the galaxy. But this enemy was different. The swarm was not made of normal ships or soldiers. Instead, it looked like a living cloud of metal and flesh mixed together. It moved like an animal but acted like a machine. When the Confederation shot their powerful laser beams at it, the swarm simply absorbed the energy and grew stronger. When they used plasma cannons, the creatures inside the swarm learned to resist the heat. Every weapon they tried only made their enemy more dangerous. The worst part was how fast the swarm learned. After just one battle, it could defend against any weapon that had hurt it before. The biomechanical creatures inside the cloud shared information instantly. What one learned, they all learned. The Confederation's greatest advantage, their advanced technology, had become useless. "Sir, we're receiving a distress signal from the system," said Communications Officer I. Her voice shook with fear. "The swarm has reached their outer defense stations." Han closed his eyes. The system had 12 billion people living on 7 different planets. If the swarm reached them, all those lives would be lost. The creatures didn't just kill their victims. They absorbed them, turning every person into part of their growing army. "How long before our reinforcements arrive?" he asked. 3 standard days, sir. But based on the swarm's current speed, will fall in less than 2 days. The Admiral felt the weight of command crushing down on him. In his 60 years of military service, he had never faced an enemy like this. Every strategy failed. Every weapon became useless. Every victory turned into defeat as the swarm grew stronger from each battle. A communication alert chimed through the ship. "Sir, you're receiving an urgent message from the High Council on Prime." The main screen flickered to life, showing the emergency session of the Council of Worlds. 12 different alien species sat around a curved table, their faces showing the same fear and desperation that Han felt. At the center sat Supreme Chancellor, an ancient whose wisdom had guided the Confederation for over a century. "Admiral Han," the Chancellor began, "we have reviewed your reports about the swarm. Our greatest scientists have studied the enemy's behavior patterns. They confirm what we all feared: our current technology cannot stop this threat." Han nodded grimly. "Yes, sir. The swarm adapts faster than we can develop new weapons. We estimate that it will reach the core worlds within 1 month if we cannot find a way to slow its advance." The council members spoke quietly among themselves. Some suggested retreat to the far edge of Confederation space. Others wanted to try one final massive assault with every ship they had. All of their ideas sounded desperate because they were desperate. Then Counselor A stood up. She was young for a council member, with the blue skin and silver hair of the species. Her people were known for their creative thinking and willingness to try new approaches. "Honored colleagues," she said, "I have a suggestion that you may not like, but desperate times require desperate measures." The chamber fell silent. Chancellor gestured for her to continue. 3 months ago, our exploration ships made contact with a new species on the galaxy's rim. They call themselves humans, and their planet is called Earth. These beings have only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. But what?" demanded Counselor, a warrior from the militant species. "What could such backward creatures possibly offer us?" I took a deep breath. "Their ships are different from ours, very different. While we focus on energy weapons and advanced shielding, they still use kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. Their vessels are built with simple metals and mechanical systems. Our scientists called their technology crude and primitive. You want us to ask these primitives for help? Voice rose in anger. The Confederation has stood for 10,000 years. We have conquered diseases, ended wars, and brought peace to hundreds of worlds. And you want us to beg for aid from beings who barely know how to travel between stars? Other council members joined the protest. The idea was insulting. The Confederation was the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had defeated every enemy, solved every problem, overcome every challenge. To ask for help from such a young and primitive species would be humiliating beyond measure. Their ships don't even have proper armor, laughed Counselor L. Our reports say they're held together with metal welding and hope. What could they possibly do against an enemy that our greatest weapons cannot touch? A remained calm despite the angry voices around her. Perhaps that is exactly why they might succeed. The swarm has learned to defend against our energy weapons, our plasma cannons, and our quantum disruptors. But it has never faced kinetic projectiles or chemical explosives. Sometimes the old ways work when the new ways fail. Chancellor raised his hand for silence. Counselor raises an interesting point. But even if these humans could help us, why would they? We have nothing to offer them except the knowledge that they would likely die fighting our enemy. Some species fight not for reward but because it is right, replied. The humans' cultural files suggest they have a strong tendency to help others in need, even at great cost to themselves. The debate continued for hours. In the end, the vote was clear. 12 council members voted against asking the humans for help. Only a voted in favor. The Confederation would face extinction with dignity rather than be saved by primitives. As the council session ended, Han returned to watching the destruction below. Another world was dying, and he was powerless to stop it. The swarm continued its advance toward the heart of Confederation space, growing stronger with each victory. But Counselor had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. Maybe the old ways really could work when the new ways failed. Maybe primitive technology was exactly what they needed. Unfortunately, the Council had forbidden any contact with the humans. The Confederation would stand alone against the darkness, even if it meant they would all fall together. Counselor waited until the middle of the night cycle before making her way to the communications center. The hallways of the council building were empty, except for the automated security drones that floated silently through the corridors. Her heart pounded as she used her access codes to enter the restricted transmission room. She knew what she was doing was against everything the council had decided. If they caught her, she would lose her position and probably face exile from Confederation space. But as she watched the daily reports of worlds falling to the swarm, she realized that following orders might mean watching her entire civilization die. The communication equipment hummed to life as she activated the long-range transmission array. She had memorized the coordinates for Earth from the first contact reports. The signal would take several hours to reach the human, even with their fastest quantum relay systems. Began recording her message, speaking in the simple human language that the diplomatic teams had taught her. Her accent was thick, but the words were clear enough. This is Counselor of the Confederation. I am sending this message against the orders of my government. We are facing an enemy that threatens to destroy our civilization. The swarm has already consumed dozens of our worlds. Our weapons cannot stop them. They learn too fast and grow stronger from every battle. She paused, looking at the star charts showing the swarm's advance. Red markers indicated fallen worlds. The pattern was clear. The creatures were heading straight for the most populated systems in Confederation space. I am sending you all the data we have collected about the swarm. Technical specifications, battle recordings, analysis of their adaptive abilities. Perhaps your people will see something that we have missed. We have become too focused on advanced solutions. Maybe simple ones will work better. The data upload took nearly an hour. I included everything: detailed scans of the biomechanical creatures, records of failed weapon tests, tactical reports from destroyed fleets, and projections of the swarm's likely path toward the core worlds. I cannot promise that my government will accept your help if you choose to offer it. Most of my people believe that asking for aid from your species would be shameful, but I believe that survival is more important than pride. If you can help us, please do. And if you cannot, please warn other civilizations to stay away from our space. She ended the transmission and immediately deleted all records of it from the communication logs. The message was now traveling through space toward Earth at the speed of light, carrying with it the desperate hope of someone willing to break the rules to save lives. On Earth, the message arrived during the early morning hours at the Global Defense Command Center in Geneva. Communications specialist Lisa Park was the first to receive the alien transmission. She had been monitoring deep space communications for 3 years, ever since humanity made first contact with the. Most messages were routine diplomatic exchanges or scientific data sharing. This message was different. The alien woman on the screen looked terrified, and her words sent chills down Lisa's spine. Park immediately forwarded the transmission to her superior, Colonel James Harrison, who took one look at the data and called an emergency meeting of the Terran Defense Council. Within 4 hours, the highest-ranking military and civilian leaders on Earth were gathered in the secure briefing room beneath the Swiss mountains. Admiral Wei, the head of Earth's small but growing space fleet, studied the alien data on his tablet while Doctor, humanity's lead, analyzed the technical specifications of the swarm. "This is incredible," Doctor said, her voice filled with scientific excitement and horror. "These creatures are like nothing we've ever seen. They're part biological organism, part mechanical construct. They can adapt their cellular structure in real time to resist different types of damage." Admiral looked up from the tactical reports. "The Confederation has been fighting them with energy weapons, lasers, plasma cannons, particle beams. Every time they use a weapon, the swarm learns to resist it. No wonder they're losing." "But look at this," Doctor continued, pointing to the biological analysis. "The adaptive process has limits. The organisms can only handle so many different adaptations at once. If you hit them with too many different types of damage simultaneously, their systems might become overloaded." General, the head of Earth's ground forces, studied the swarm's movement patterns. "They're consuming everything in their path. Every person, every resource, every ship they destroy just makes them stronger. It's like fighting a forest fire that grows bigger every time you pour water on it." Admiral stood up and walked to the large display showing the galaxy map. The Confederation's territory was marked in blue, with red indicators showing the swarm's advance. "They have been our allies since first contact. They've shared technology with us, helped us understand galactic politics, and treated us as equals despite our primitive technology." "Actually," Doctor interrupted, "maybe our primitive technology is exactly what we need here. Look at these adaptation patterns. The swarm has learned to resist energy weapons, but there's no indication it has ever faced kinetic projectiles or chemical explosives." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth's military still relied heavily on physical projectiles, bullets, missiles, and explosives, because they were cheap, reliable, and effective. The more advanced alien races had moved beyond such crude weapons centuries ago. "Are you suggesting," Admiral asked slowly, "that our old-fashioned bullets and bombs might work against an enemy that can resist alien death rays?" "It's possible," Doctor replied. "But there's something else. The swarm's biology is incredibly complex, but it's still biological. They might be vulnerable to biological warfare diseases, toxins, genetic weapons, things that don't cause direct damage but disrupt their internal systems." Colonel Harrison spoke up. "Earth has more experience with biological warfare than any other species in the galaxy. We've been fighting diseases and pests for thousands of years. We know how to create viruses, bacteria, and chemical compounds that can destroy biological targets." The debate continued for several more hours. Some argued that Earth lacked the military strength to face an enemy that had defeated the mighty Confederation. Others pointed out that they hadn't actually asked for help. This was just one counselor acting against her government's wishes. In the end, it was Admiral who made the decision that would change galactic history. The Confederation treated us as equals when they could have ignored us or conquered us. They shared their knowledge and friendship. Now they're facing extinction, and their pride won't let them ask for help. He looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. But sometimes the right thing to do isn't about what people ask for. It's about what people need. And right now, they need help, whether they want to admit it or not. The vote was unanimous. Earth would send a military expedition to assist the Confederation, invited or not. The Terran Defense Fleet would prepare their most unconventional weapons, not the energy weapons they had from alien technology, but the simple, brutal, effective tools that humanity had perfected through centuries of warfare. As the meeting ended, Doctor made one final observation that would prove prophetic. The aliens have been trying to fight this swarm like a conventional enemy, but it's not an army, it's an infestation. And humans are very good at dealing with infestations. Within hours, Earth's small but determined fleet began preparing for the most important mission in human history. They were going to save a civilization that was too proud to be saved. The warning alarms rang through the bridge of High Admiral Hand's command ship as 3 unknown vessels dropped out of hyperspace. The sensor operator, her voice tight with stress, called out readings that made no sense. "Sir, we have 3 ships approaching from the galactic rim. Energy signatures are unusual. They're not using any technology in our databases." Han rushed to the sensor station. After weeks of constant retreat from the advancing swarm, any unknown ships could be either salvation or another disaster. "Can you identify their species?" The sensor display showed 3 vessels unlike anything in the Confederation fleet. Where ships were smooth and graceful, curved like sea creatures, these newcomers were angular and brutal. They looked like metal boxes covered in small gun turrets and missile pods. Thick armor plating covered every surface, and strange symbols were painted on their hulls. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission. It's from the humans." Han felt his heart skip a beat. The humans? How did they even know about the crisis? There was months away at the edge of known space. The Council had specifically forbidden any contact with their primitive species. The main screen flickered to life, showing a human female with short dark hair and intense brown eyes. She wore a simple military uniform without the decorative elements that most Confederation officers preferred. "This is Captain Sarah of the Terran Defense Force ship Resilience," she said, her voice calm and professional. "We received word that you might need some assistance with a pest control problem, requesting permission to join your defensive efforts." The bridge fell silent. Pest control. Did this human just refer to the galaxy's greatest threat as a pest problem? Before Han could respond, his tactical officer spoke up. "Sir, the swarm has detected the human ships. It's changing course to intercept them." On the display screen, the massive cloud of biomechanical creatures turned like a living storm. The swarm had grown enormous since its first appearance, now stretching across several thousand kilometers of space. Within its dark mass, millions of individual creatures moved and flowed like cells in a giant organism. "Captain," Han said urgently, "you must retreat immediately. That swarm will destroy your ships in minutes. Your technology cannot stand against it." The human captain smiled, and there was something unsettling about that expression. "With respect, Admiral, you've been trying to fight this thing with energy weapons and force fields. We're going to try a different approach." Han watched in horror as the three human ships accelerated directly toward the swarm. They were committing suicide, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But instead of firing weapons, the human ships began ejecting cargo from their holds. Thousands of metal containers, chemical drums, and what looked like garbage scattered into space between the fleet and the approaching swarm. The debris field spread out like a net, creating a barrier of floating junk. "What are they doing?" demanded the tactical officer. "Are they trying to block the swarm with garbage?" Captain's voice came through the communications channel. "Negative, Admiral. We're not trying to block anything. We're setting the dinner table." The first wave of creatures hit the debris field and immediately began absorbing the material. This was their standard behavior. The swarm consumed everything in its path, breaking down matter to fuel its growth and adaptation. The watching Confederation officers could only stare in disbelief as the humans appeared to feed their enemy. But Dr. Maria Santos, the expedition's chief scientist, was monitoring the swarm's biological processes through Earth's advanced sensors. What she saw made her smile grimly. "Captain, the first batch is working. We're seeing cellular confusion in the absorption zones." The debris the humans had ejected wasn't random garbage. Every container held carefully designed payloads, engineered viruses that targeted specific biological processes, metallic nanoparticles that interfered with the creature's adaptive mechanisms, and chemical compounds that would poison their cellular functions. "You see," Captain explained to the watching aliens, "we've been dealing with invasive species and biological threats on Earth for thousands of years. We know that the best way to fight an organism isn't to hit it harder, it's to make it sick." The swarm continued absorbing the debris, unable to resist its programming to consume and grow. But as more contaminated material entered its system, strange things began happening. Parts of the swarm started moving erratically. Some creatures began attacking each other instead of maintaining formation. "The engineered viruses are interfering with their communication systems," Dr. Santos reported. "They're still trying to adapt, but they can't coordinate their responses effectively." Admiral Han watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The swarm, which had seemed unstoppable for months, was showing signs of distress for the first time. Some sections were slowing down, others were changing direction randomly, and the overall formation was becoming chaotic. "How is this possible?" he asked Captain. "Simple biology," she replied. "Your people have been trying to destroy the swarm through direct force, but biological systems have weaknesses that physical systems don't. They can get sick, they can be poisoned, and most importantly, they can be confused." The human ships continued deploying their unconventional weapons. Instead of energy beams or explosive missiles, they launched containers of modified Earth bacteria, clouds of industrial toxins, and swarms of mechanical parasites designed to interfere with the creature's biomechanical systems. Each payload was different, forcing the swarm to adapt to multiple threats simultaneously. The creature's incredible ability to learn and evolve, which had made them invincible against conventional weapons, was becoming a liability. They couldn't adapt to everything at once. But even as the humans celebrated their initial success, the swarm began to adapt to their biological warfare. Some creatures started rejecting the contaminated material instead of absorbing it. Others developed immunity to the toxins. The window of opportunity was closing fast. "Captain," Dr. Santos called out, "they're learning to resist our biological agents. The adaptation rate is increasing." Captain nodded calmly. "Expected. Maria, are we ready for Phase 2? "All ships report ready, Captain." Han felt a chill of dread. "Phase 2? What is Phase 2? The human captain's expression became grim. "Admiral, our ships aren't just weapons platforms. They're delivery systems. We knew the swarm would eventually adapt to biological warfare, so we prepared for that possibility." On the tactical display, the three human ships began to change. Outer hull sections detached and fell away, revealing that each vessel was essentially a massive missile disguised as a starship. The crew sections were tiny compared to the enormous payload bays that made up most of each ship's mass. "We're about to ram our ships into the core nodes of the swarm," Captain explained matter-of-factly. "Each ship contains enough biological agents to poison an entire planet. Not just viruses and bacteria, but engineered plagues, chemical weapons, and genetic bombs designed to turn the swarm's adaptive abilities against itself." The Confederation officers stared in shock. The humans were planning to sacrifice their ships, and possibly their lives, to deliver a payload of biological devastation that would make their earlier attacks look like gentle medicine. "You'll die," Han protested. "Your ships won't survive impact with the swarm's core." "Probably not," Captain agreed. "But that's what humans do, Admiral. When people need help, we help them, even if it costs us everything." The three human ships accelerated toward their targets, their crews calm and determined. They had come across the galaxy to save people they barely knew, using weapons that most civilized species would consider horrifying. But as Admiral Han watched them approach certain death, he realized something important. These weren't primitive barbarians using crude weapons. These were warriors who understood that sometimes the only way to save lives was to risk your own. And for the first time in months, he began to believe that the swarm might actually be defeated. Captain Sarah gripped her command chair as the TDF Resilience shook under the swarm's defensive fire. Around her, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency despite knowing they were flying toward certain death. The biomechanical creatures had begun shooting back, launching streams of acidic projectiles and energy bursts that ate through the ship's armor. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Lieutenant Torres from the damage control station. "Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we're losing atmosphere." "Keep us on course," Sarah ordered. "How long until we reach the core node?" 30 seconds, Captain," called out Navigator from his station. "Target is directly ahead." Through the main viewer, Sarah could see their destination, a massive cluster of the largest creatures at the center of the swarm. Intelligence suggested this was the coordination center, where the collective organisms shared information and directed the swarm's movement. If they could poison that central nervous system, the entire swarm might collapse. Dr. Santos worked frantically at her science station, monitoring the biological agents they had already deployed. "Captain, the preliminary attacks are working better than we hoped. The swarm is showing system-wide cellular confusion. Their adaptation protocols are overloading." The human strategy was proving devastatingly effective. Unlike the Confederation's approach of using more powerful weapons, the humans had weaponized the swarm's greatest strength, its ability to adapt and learn. By hitting it with dozens of different biological threats simultaneously, they had overwhelmed the creature's evolutionary mechanisms. "It's like trying to develop immunity to every disease on Earth all at once," Dr. Santos had explained during their planning. "Even the most advanced immune system can't handle that much chaos." On the Confederation command ship, Admiral Han watched the human attack with a mixture of amazement and horror. The three Earth vessels had torn through the swarm's outer defenses like arrows shot through a storm cloud. Their crude kinetic weapons and chemical explosives were punching holes in biomechanical creatures that had shrugged off the Confederation's most advanced energy weapons. "How are they penetrating the swarm's adaptive armor?" asked his tactical officer. "Simple physics," replied Dr. Ara, the fleet's chief scientist. "The swarm's defensive systems were designed to absorb and redirect energy attacks, but kinetic projectiles carry physical momentum that can't be absorbed, only stopped or deflected. And the human's chemical explosives create molecular disruption that the biomechanical systems can't adapt to quickly enough." The first human ship, the TDF Defiance, reached its target and rammed directly into a cluster of the largest organisms. The impact drove the vessel deep into the creature's mass before the ship's fusion reactor overloaded in a controlled detonation. The explosion released not just energy, but clouds of engineered biological warfare, agents that the humans had spent decades perfecting. Within minutes, the effects became visible. The massive creatures around the impact site began convulsing as modified Earth bacteria attacked their cellular structures. These weren't random diseases, but carefully designed biological weapons that targeted the specific biomechanical interfaces that allowed the swarm creatures to function. "My God," whispered Dr. Aura. "They've created pathogens that specifically attack the creature's technological components. They're giving the swarm the equivalent of a computer virus and biological plague at the same time." The second ship, TDF Courage, made its attack run on another core cluster. This vessel carried a different payload, genetically modified parasites based on Earth's most aggressive invasive species. These organisms were designed to live inside the creatures and slowly consume them from within while avoiding detection by their immune systems. Captain watched her fellow humans sacrifice themselves without hesitation. Each ship carried not just biological weapons, but the knowledge and courage of an entire species that had learned to survive in a hostile galaxy through adaptation and cooperation. "Resilience, you're approaching your target," came the voice of Captain Martinez from the dying TDF Courage. "Give them hell, Sarah." "Copy that, see you on the other side." The TDF Resilience carried the most devastating payload of all, a combination of every biological warfare agent humanity had ever developed, modified to work against biomechanical systems. But more importantly, it carried something the other ships didn't: a complete genetic database of Earth's biological diversity. Dr. Santos made final adjustments to their weapon systems. "Captain, I've loaded the genetic templates for every virus, bacteria, fungus, and parasite in Earth's history. When we detonate, it won't just release our engineered weapons. It will give the swarm access to 4 billion years of evolutionary warfare." "Won't that make them stronger?" asked Lieutenant Torres. "Normally, yes," Santos replied. "But we've modified the genetic data. Instead of giving them useful adaptations, we're flooding their systems with contradictory information. Every time they try to adapt to one threat, they'll automatically create vulnerabilities to 10 others." The resilience penetrated deep into the swarm's core, taking massive damage from the creature's desperate defensive attacks. Hull breaches opened across multiple decks, and the ship's life support systems began failing. But the crew held their positions, determined to complete their mission. 10 seconds to target," Navigator announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Captain opened a communication channel to the Confederation fleet. "Admiral Han, this is Captain. In a few moments, our ship will detonate inside the swarm's central nervous system. The biological agents we release will take time to spread through their entire network. Don't approach the affected areas for at least 6 hours. Our weapons don't discriminate between hostile and friendly biological systems." "Captain," Han's voice came through the static-filled channel, "your sacrifice will not be forgotten. The Confederation owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." Sarah smiled as the ship shook under another impact. "Admiral, we didn't come here for payment. We came because it was the right thing to do." The TDF Resilience struck the largest concentration of organisms at the very heart of the swarm. The ship's fusion reactor overloaded in a brilliant flash of light, releasing its deadly cargo into the creature's collective nervous system. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The swarm continued its advance, seemingly unaffected by the human sacrifice. But Dr. Santos had warned that biological warfare took time to work. The weapons needed to spread through the swarm's network and begin their devastating work. Then slowly, the impossible began to happen. The swarm started to slow down. Individual creatures began moving erratically, no longer following the collective's coordinated plan. Some turned and attacked their neighbors. Others simply stopped moving entirely. "The biological agents are working," reported Dr. Ara from the Confederation flagship. "The swarm's communication network is breaking down. They're losing coordination across their entire formation." The engineered diseases spread through the swarm like wildfire. Each creature that became infected passed the contamination to its neighbors through their shared biological network. The very system that had made them invincible, their ability to instantly share adaptations and knowledge, had become the vector for their destruction. Within hours, the mighty swarm was dying. The biomechanical creatures that had terrorized the galaxy were succumbing to modified Earth bacteria, engineered parasites, and genetic weapons that turned their own adaptive abilities against them. But the humans had paid a terrible price for victory. 3 ships and their crews had sacrificed themselves to save a civilization that had initially rejected their help. The courage of those men and women would become legend throughout the galaxy. As Admiral Han watched the swarm collapse, he realized that the humans had taught the Confederation something more valuable than military tactics. They had shown that sometimes the greatest strength wasn't in advanced technology or superior weapons, but in the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. The primitive species from the galactic rim had saved them all. 3 days after the battle, the swarm was completely dead. The massive biomechanical cloud that had terrorized the galaxy for months now drifted through space as billions of lifeless husks. The human biological weapons had spread through every creature in the collective, causing a cascade failure that destroyed the entire network. High Admiral Han stood in the observation deck of his flagship, watching Confederation recovery ships collect the debris. Each dead creature would be studied carefully to understand how the humans had achieved what seemed impossible. But even more important than the scientific data was the lesson about warfare itself. The door chimed, and Counselor A entered. She had been the only council member to vote for asking the humans for help, and now she looked tired but vindicated. The emergency session that had just ended on Prime had been difficult for many council members to accept. "How did the meeting go?" Han asked. "As well as could be expected," A replied. "Supreme Chancellor has officially thanked Earth for their assistance and invited them to join the Confederation as full members, but several council members are uncomfortable with how easily our technology was proven inadequate." The Admiral nodded. He understood their discomfort. For 10,000 years, the Confederation had been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Their energy weapons, force fields, and quantum computers had made them virtually invincible against any enemy. But a species that still used chemical rockets and metal bullets had defeated a threat that their greatest weapons could not touch. "The humans are arriving for the memorial ceremony," A continued. "Admiral Wei himself is coming to honor the crews who died saving us." A small Earth fleet had arrived that morning to retrieve the bodies of their fallen heroes. The 3 ships that had sacrificed themselves were gone, but their crews' escape pods had been recovered. Unfortunately, most of the pods had been damaged beyond the point where life support could function. Out of 300 humans who had come to help, only 47 had survived. The ceremony took place in the main hangar of the Confederation flagship. Representatives from dozens of species came to honor the humans who had died for people they barely knew. Admiral Wei, an elderly man with steel-gray hair and tired eyes, stood before the assembled crowd wearing a simple black uniform. "My daughter Sarah knew the risks when she volunteered for this mission," he said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "Every person who served in the Terran Expeditionary Force understood that they might not come home, but they also knew that people needed help, and that was enough reason to try." Admiral Han had prepared a long speech about honor, sacrifice, and the debt that the Confederation could never repay. But when he stood to address the gathering, he found himself speaking from the heart instead. "For months, we faced an enemy that seemed invincible," he began. "Our greatest weapons failed. Our most advanced strategies were useless. We were losing hope and preparing for extinction. Then 3 human ships arrived, carrying crews who had never seen our worlds, never met our people, and owed us nothing." He looked directly at Admiral. "Your people came anyway. They looked at an impossible situation and decided to help because it was the right thing to do. They didn't use advanced weapons or complex strategies. They used courage, creativity, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers." The memorial service continued with representatives from each of the saved worlds speaking about the human sacrifice. Millions of lives had been preserved because a small group of humans refused to let pride and politics prevent them from doing what they thought was right. But the most moving moment came when Dr. Earth's lead presented her analysis of the battle to the assembled scientists. "The Confederation has been fighting wars for thousands of years," she explained. "You've become very good at destroying things efficiently and cleanly, but humans learned warfare on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. We didn't have the luxury of elegant solutions. We had to fight dirty, use whatever worked, and never give up." She displayed recordings of the biological warfare agents attacking the swarm. "You tried to fight with energy weapons because that's what civilized species do, but the swarm wasn't civilized. It was an infestation, and humans are experts at dealing with infestations." Dr. Aura, the Confederation's chief scientist, asked the question that everyone was thinking. "How did your species develop such devastating biological weapons?" Doctor smiled sadly. "We didn't develop them to fight aliens. We developed them to fight each other. Humans have been creating diseases, poisons, and genetic weapons for centuries. We know how to make organisms sick because we've had a lot of practice making ourselves sick." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had saved the galaxy using weapons originally designed for their own species' wars. They had turned their greatest shame, their talent for destruction, into salvation for others. After the ceremony, Admiral approached Counselor privately. "I wanted to thank you personally," he said. "If you hadn't sent that message, we would never have known about the threat in time to help." "I broke the Council's orders," A replied. "Many of my colleagues still believe I acted improperly." "Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules," Admiral said. "My daughter understood that. Your message gave her the chance to save millions of lives. She would have considered that worth any risk." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth. A young officer approached Admiral with a worried expression. "Sir, we're receiving reports of unusual activity in the border zone. Long-range sensors are detecting energy signatures similar to the swarm, but larger. Much larger." Admiral read the report, his face growing grim. Another threat was approaching, and this one might be even worse than the last. But when he looked up at the assembled aliens and humans, he didn't see despair. He saw determination. "Counselor, he said formally, on behalf of Earth, I accept your invitation for humanity to join the Confederation. But I think we need to change how this alliance works." "What do you mean?" she asked. "Your people are brilliant at science, engineering, and maintaining peace, but you've forgotten how to fight dirty when necessary. Our people are good at fighting dirty, but we need to learn how to think beyond simple survival." Admiral gestured to the mixed group of humans and aliens around them. "Separately, we each have weaknesses. Together, we might be strong enough to handle whatever comes next." The new threat from space would indeed prove to be terrible. But when it arrived, it would face not just the advanced technology of the Confederation or the brutal pragmatism of humanity, but both working together. High Admiral Han later wrote in his official report, "The humans taught us that survival isn't about having the best weapons or the most advanced technology. It's about being willing to adapt, sacrifice, and help others even when it costs you everything. They saved our civilization not because they were stronger or smarter than us, but because they understood something we had forgotten. Sometimes the simplest solutions work best, and sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. Years later, when the galaxy faced new threats, the combined fleets would fight with both alien energy weapons and human kinetic projectiles, both quantum computers and biological warfare, both elegant strategies and dirty tactics. They would face the universe together, knowing that no enemy could stand against the combination of advanced wisdom and primitive determination. But they would never forget the three ships and their crews who proved that sometimes the most important weapon in any war is the willingness to help others, no matter what it costs. Captain Sarah and her fellow humans had shown the galaxy something more powerful than any technology. They had shown them what it meant to be heroes, not because they were perfect, but because they cared enough to try, even when the odds were impossible and the cost was everything. Their sacrifice would echo through galactic history as proof that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from advanced civilization, but from the simple courage to do what's right.